It. I got it. Get us started. I'll let Tom in, and yeah, get live going.
It's so good to see the new headquarters. It looks fabulous.
Oh yeah, it's on and popping. Sheree, how you been?
Alrighty. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another installment of Mumbo Jumbo Community Conversations. My name is Chinyelu. I'll be one of your conversation facilitators for today. We're joined by the illustrious Cherie Renee Thomas, renowned Afrofuturist author, editor, and I'm going to throw philosopher on there because you probably deserve it. So. But yeah, she'll be helping us facilitate as we discuss one of my personal favorite books, Parable of the Sower. You can't really see it if you're watching on the Zoom, I think. You see I'm holding it, but you probably can't read the cover. But Parable of the Sower by Octavia Butler. Both in honor of Black History Month, and since this book study will be stretching on through March, Women's History Month as well. So, yeah, definitely a really relevant text. We're going to get into it nice and thorough tonight. But first, of course, we got to start off with our check-in ritual. For anybody who is new to the Kepler space, has not done a meeting with us before, the check-in is just something that we do to make sure that we are staying, relationship focused, people centered, as is our main mission here, and just to make sure that we are, prioritizing everybody's needs, and understanding where everybody's at, so help us have a good conversation here today. So what that typically looks like is everybody will go around the circle. Everybody will give their number and their color, each of which are supposed to kind of represent like how you're feeling, and then we'll have an icebreaker question as well that's supposed to help us get to know each other a little bit deeper. So typically, that icebreaker question can be anything, but typically I do like to do something that's like related to the topic, at least for Mumbo Jumbo. So maybe for today, we'll kill two birds with one stone. And for the check-in question, let's do your number, your color, how much of Parable of the Sower have you read? And yeah, how do you feel? And how do you feel about spoilers? Yeah, so that'll be. I'll go ahead and get it started, and then I'll start passing it around. I'm feeling like a camo green. I'm gonna say an 8 today. I'm very tired, but it's really great to see so many people here to discuss a book that I love so much. Tom, could you join us at the table? We got seats. No, I understand. Hey, if you want to switch out the chairs for the armchair. Oh, he's got one. Okay, great. But yeah, so I'm feeling like a camo green 8 today. Glad to see so many people in the space with us today. And I've read all the book, as a good facilitator should. And I actually don't mind spoilers at all. I think I kind of need spoilers because even when I'm reading things by myself, I'll skip ahead a few chapters just to kind of see who's still alive, and what they're maybe dealing with, even if I don't go too deep. So, and I will pass it to Khaled.
Um, Feeling dark purple 6, and I'm fine with spoilers. I generally don't care. 0.
And then pass that one to Tom for me. So, all right, thank you.
Hello. Thank you. Um, I'm slate gray 7.95 today. And yeah, I've actually I first joined the Kepler space sort of in 21-ish. Was introduced to the book, and so did the book on CD then, and it was just too much. And I just recently did that again, beautifully performed on the CD. And I've gone through it twice, but really it took the second time for a lot of it to sink in. Plus, having spent that much more time with the Kepler space in the Kepler space, it just meant that much more and was that much more relevant to what's going on right now. So in spoilers, doesn't bother me a bit. So I'll pass it along.
So I'm feeling a light green. Numbers like solid 6 today. And I've read none of the book. And honestly, I love spoilers.
You said, you said you're with spoilers?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Yeah, wonderful.
Sarah, I didn't know the number range, so I said 23 in my head.
Perfect.
I'm 23. Green, no specification, and what was the other? Oh, none of the book. Neutral on spoilers
Great.
here.
Charlotte, I have read, I'm a 7 and a blue, and I've read and listened to the first 3 chapters like 4 times, and then now I'm at about chapter 7. And spoilers, I love spoilers. Like I love the ending of a movie before I see the movie. I love them. So bring it on. Yeah.
I feel like I need to say I don't like spoilers just to break it up a little bit. I'm Bill. I would say my day was probably a 5 today, but it's improving towards a 7, so that's good. It's on its upward trajectory. Color, I'd say let's go burnt orange. I've read about 9 chapters of the book or so, and I really don't mind spoilers either. So ready to dive in.
To anybody on the Zoom there, I'll take the mic.
We'll go to Alvin.
Thanks, Bill. Alvin here, feeling like an 8, sage green. And I read the book a couple years ago, and I do not like spoilers, so don't worry about spoiling it. I've read it, but to me, I always want to know like what's going to happen. I want to have the unknown, and I will pass it over to my mom, Betty.
And real quick, yeah, I know, weird, right? I should have asked this at the beginning. Please, everybody who introduces yourself from this point on, although you're on the Zoom, so we can see your names, but give your name, and then if you speak and haven't said your name already, give us your name one more time after the check-in. So thank you. Continue.
Okay, I'm Betty, and my color is forest green. I'm probably a 9 today. I have read the book. It's been a year or two ago, and I'm kind of neutral about spoilers too. Sometimes I like them, sometimes I don't. And I don't know who to pass it on because I'm on my phone and I can't see who's here. So if someone else wants to hop in, that'd be great.
I guess I can hop in.
Perfect.
So my name is Cassandra. I sometimes go by Cass. Let's see. I'm feeling about like a gray 10 because the day was just the entire day here is just gray. So about a gray 10. Feeling all right. Let's see. I have read all of the book, and yeah, it's sometimes I like spoilers and sometimes I don't. Like it just depends on like the book. Um, I do not know why that is, but it just depends. And let's see. I guess I could pass it to Donna.
Hi, I'm Donna. I don't really know how to put how my day was into numbers. I feel like that's always difficult for me, but I feel green, like a muddy green. And I've read the book. I think something that might be difficult I am anticipating right now is that I've also read the sequel, so I'm trying to like remember where it stops, and if at any point I ever say too much,
Just be
please
careful. Just
tell
do
me
your
to shut up.
best.
Yeah. Spoilers. I don't like spoilers, but like I said, I've read the book, so yeah.
Pass it to the next person.
Pass it to me, Donna.
Oh, my bad. Yeah, Z.
Oh, wait. Hey, y'all. Feeling like a peachy pastel color. I'm a 8.5, and I read the book. and I am agnostic on spoilers. Like, I'm a nosy person, so like maybe I do want to know, but also maybe I want to live it for the first time. So I don't really care. And I'll pass to you, Cherie.
Hi. Hey, I'm a sixth grade, and then when I get some water in me, then I'm an eight, moss green. I read the book, and I'm sometimey on spoilers too. Like, I don't care about spoilers for movies, and for books, I usually just like to discover it myself. So yeah. And I read the book, obviously. Yeah.
And then I think, well, Tara
We'll
needs to
pass
go,
it
and
to
then Jeru, you
Tara.
can close us out. Yeah.
We'll pass it to Tara McFarland.
Yeah. Hey y'all, it's Tara. I'm feeling like a purple eight. Um, I have not finished the book. I read up to chapter 19. And I do not like spoilers. So I'm sorry to disappoint you all on this call, but do not spoil it for me, please. I beg of you, or I will just leave the call and let you guys have it. And I'll pass it to Jeru.
Or say spoiler alert and do like I do. I go la 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 for like 4 like.
Okay. If it's like something that like I don't recognize, then I'll just like throw my phone across the room or something. I don't know.
Just forget. I don't understand. Just forget and lose your
Listen, you
memory.
You
It's all
can't
good.
forget.
It's easy. But hey everybody, Jay here, running tech from behind the screen so you can't see me. I'm hidden right now. I'm feeling like a red and black 10 today. Feels good to see so much enthusiasm towards this book in this moment. Feels very appropriate.
Oh
Today has me
yeah.
feeling good, and I've read all the book. It was a while back, to be fair, so I will be thinking very hard about my spoilers and what I'm saying. And I love spoilers personally, except for if it's like the whole point is it's like a twist ending or something, then I might be a little bit miffed. But I like spoilers because I like, especially like for movies, I like watching and being like, oh, okay, it feels like it gives you more to look at when you're watching something or reading something when you already got the end in mind. And I will pass it. Miss Pambana, did you go? Am I tripping?
No, I didn't go, so thanks, Jero.
Of course, I'd never forget you.
Appreciate that. Sunlight, White, Infinity, and when I was younger, I hated spoilers because like I get excited to go see movies and see how they unfold or read a book. But now that I'm older, I'm like, whatever. So spoilers. But I've read the whole book. I'm rereading it again, and I read Parable of the Talents as well. So I don't know where this ends and that begins. So hopefully, Tara, I won't spoil it for you.
Wonderful.
All right, and I'll pass it to Stephanie.
Oh,
Hello, I am a seven gray red because they go together today. I'm sorry, what was the check-in question?
how much of the book have you read, and how do you feel about spoilers?
I have read about a quarter of the book, and it depends. I would not like them in this book, though,
Okay,
in this discussion.
fair
So
enough.
so spoiler alert is appreciated. Thank you.
Yeah. Alrighty, great. Perfect. Well, thank you so much, everybody, for checking in. We may have some more people join us on the call or here in the room as the conversation goes on. And oh, there's one right now. Keenan, go ahead and check in first, brother. It's number, color, and how much of the book have you read, and how do you feel about spoilers?
All right, peace everyone. Name is Keenan. Number 10 today. Color sky blue. Let's see. Have I read the book? Yes. And how do I feel about spoilers? It depends. There is there are some things I do not want spoiled, like really great movies that I have not seen. I somehow made it many years without having ever seen Game of Thrones. And then when I finally decided to watch it, Tano spoiled something that was coming up in the season for me,
Mm-mm-mm.
and I like was so angry. I was filled with like seething rage.
That sounds like him.
Yeah, and like spoiled like a few things, and then when they finally came up, I was like, "You got to be kidding me!" Like I was like, "Oh my God." Um, but yeah, but like for things like One Piece that like you have to wait once every week or maybe even 2 weeks for just a new chapter, which is like 12 or 13 pages. I read the spoilers all the time. I'm like, I can't
Yeah.
wait.
Yeah.
Yeah. All
Awesome.
right, check.
Perfect. Well, yeah. So, as I was saying, we may have more people join us during the conversation, and if we do, we'll just find the natural pauses in the conversation to let them give their check-ins as well. But for now, let's go ahead and get started with the discussion. We've got a nice big group here. I think here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to first we're gonna set a few ground rules just because there's a lot of people, and it might get contentious. I don't think it will, but it might. And I just want to remind everybody that this is not where we go to figure out whose ideas are right and wrong. This is where we go to like share ideas and explore those differences. So, if you hear something that you don't disagree with, offer your rebuttal and let it go. And I will take the mic from you if I have to. So there's that. Two, I'm going to give a little brief information about Octavia Butler, just so that, we know who we're listening to right now. I'm going to then pass it to Cherie to give a little bit of her context and background as it relates to, her understanding of this story and of this writer as somebody who's just like deep in that world and well versed in, the genre and the form. And then because we've got a great group today of people who have either read most of the book or read the part that we're going to cover today, or don't mind if we talk about the things that they haven't read, we're just going to kind of walk through the first 6 chapters of the book, taking sort of like maybe 10 to 15 minutes a chapter. Get out of here by probably about 8, if that's all right with everybody. That's what it said on the Eventbrite, so it better be. But yeah, so to start off, Parable of the Sower, Octavia Butler. Who was Octavia Butler? I'm reading off of a post that I put together for our Instagram, so go check that out if you get a chance. But Octavia Butler was born June 22nd, 1947, in Pasadena, California. Only child. Her mother was a widow, and she worked as a maid, as a hospitality worker, and Octavia went around with her doing that a lot. She was very shy as a child, so she did not do a lot in the social realm. But she did spend a lot of time at the Pasadena Public Library reading books and writing books, as it turns out. So she graduated from Pasadena City College in 1968. She won her first Hugo Award in 1984 with her short story Speech Sounds, and then won her second Hugo the next year with Bloodchild. She wrote Parable of the Sower or published Parable of the Sower in 1993, which is crazy because she basically called it in terms of what America would be like 30 years later. So, and as she said, she didn't make up any of the problems. She just looked at the problems of her time and, gave them time to mature into full-fledged disasters. And they did. So yeah, I'm sure we'll probably get into that a little bit. I think that that's sort of like prescience and future sight and just like reading the situation well enough to predict the future is definitely one of the big themes in the book. But for now, Cherie, I'll pass it to you to give us your take on this story on Octavia Butler and set the tone for the conversation. Honestly.
Okay, so we're all here because we're either already fans of Octavia E. Butler, the E is for Estelle, um, or you are new to her work and you've heard all of the great buzz that's been happening. Parable of the Sower is a fantastic novel that she published several decades ago. But as you read it, you will discover that it has a lot of relevance for us today. For me, Octavia Butler, and for so many other people, she is just a visionary storyteller. She was a great master writer. She had very clear prose. She didn't create characters that are just easy necessarily. They have their strengths, they have their flaws. Even her villains have their reasons. So I always thought that was really well done in her work. And to me, she's a weaver of worlds, right? And the thing that really pulled me into her work in the first novel I read of hers was Kindred, right? I was in a slavery and literature class in college, and it was on the syllabus along with works by Margaret Walker and Shirley Ann Williams and Charles Johnson, and great writers like that. Toni Morrison, obviously, beloved, those kinds of books. But I had never read a science fiction book or a fantasy book that had been written by a Black woman, and the one that I read was Kindred. So that was my first introduction to Octavia E. Butler, and then I began to read everything I could find of hers, which was a lot. Wild Sea became my favorite, and I think it still is my favorite. But Parable of the Sower is very much a second on that. She just really had a powerful way of writing and telling stories and really making it feel contemporary and relevant to what what's going on today. So that's what I want to say about Octavia E. Butler. And there are a lot of other good things that I want you to know about her. Obviously, me and other people got a chance to study with her. She was a teacher at Clarion West, which is the place, as Chen already mentioned, where she sold her first short story and became a professional writer. And I don't know about the rest of the writers, but in science fiction and fantasy and horror, you are a professional writer when you are paid for your work. So that was her first time being paid for her story. But the thing about her is she had been interested in storytelling since she was a little girl. Jen already mentioned that she was very, very shy. She was extremely shy. And she obviously came out of that as she became more developed as a writer, and her career began to take off. But she found a lot of comfort, like a lot of writers, in the world of the world, and she built her world for herself on paper. What inspired her to become a writer? Apparently, she was watching a really bad science fiction movie called Devil Girl from Mars. I don't know if any of you have seen it, but it came out in 1954. And she watched this movie and she thought, you know what? I know I can write a story better than that. And that's what she set about to doing. The other thing I think is interesting about her, a lot of times writers are very bougie la. They come from very soft landings, comfortable kind of middle class backgrounds or whatever. And they write about comfortable middle class people who have like some type of a situation, the what if situation of the story. But Octavia came from working class people in Southern California, and she herself made a conscious decision, because she was so invested in her own writing, that she would not have a career that would take her away from her writing, but that she would work regular working class odd jobs so that she could spend the bulk of her energy and focus on her creative work. That's how determined she was to be a successful writer. So I was, astonished to find out that she woke up at 2 a.m. every day to write before she went off to work. And that she worked in factories, and that she worked in like potato chip factories and things like that, which is a little reference to that in Kindred. The other thing that makes her so powerful is that she was the first science fiction writer to be awarded the MacArthur Genius Grant. And that was in 1995. And I got a chance to, I met her before Clarion, but I got to spend more time with her at Clarion in 1998. And I believe she had not too long, she decided to buy a house in Seattle. And so that's where she was when she passed on. But she used that MacArthur Genius money, which was quite a lot of money. And it still is today. I think it's about $800,000 today to help her buy that home. Harlan Ellison is often credited for recognizing her work, but she was recognized before that, and definitely recognized in the community. But it was her being in Clarion that really brought her attention to the science fiction community. The other thing people don't know, she was dyslexic. And so she, like a lot of people who have dyslexia, had to really focus and proofread her work and everything to make sure that it said what she thought it said when she was writing it. And so I think that's just a really wonderful thing to know about her. And there are other things we can talk about later, but that was her, Octavia Butler, generous teacher, very straightforward, had a wonderful laugh, very tall, flawless skin, beautiful eyes, just a great, great, great person. And we all wish she had lived much longer so that she could see how much her work has been celebrated. She became a New York Times bestseller after she had passed away. It was during, I believe, during it might have been during COVID, but it might have been before, a little bit before that. But it was one of her dreams, and there's an archive of her writing and work at the Huntington Library, and I believe it is safe from the fires, where you can see all of her childhood writing and all the other things that she meticulously kept, because she was a big researcher as well. So that's all I'll say about Octavia E. Butler right
How
now.
do you think she would have felt to see so many of her predictions come true?
I think she would have been horrified, but I think she would have been like, yeah.
I told you. Yeah.
I mean, because I mean, we can get into that in the conversation and see what you all think. Is she an oracle? Is she a prophet? Or was she a shrewd observer of the world, a pattern person who she has a series called Pattern Master. So is she a person that is seeing the patterns, right? So that's something we can talk about.
Yeah.
What you guys think? Weigh in on that.
Thank you so much, Cherie. I think that's actually a perfect segue to talking about the first chapter. Real quick, I see Zolani Zulu joined us. Zolani, would you mind checking in for us? It's your number, your color, and how much of Parable of the Sower have you read, and how do you feel about spoilers? And if you can't come off mute, feel free to put it in the chat. But yeah, just let us know. But yeah, so let's go ahead and get started with the conversation. Let's start getting into the book with chapter 1. And what I'll say is that one other thing that I'll say, especially for our people who have read beyond Parable of the Sower, if you feel like you're going to say something that might be a spoiler, that might be beyond the first 6 chapters of the book, just let us know so we have time to cover our ears and, but we'll do it. Let's all just do our best. But the first thing that I want to bring up in chapter 1 is this. So chapter 1 is really kind of like our introduction to the world. I think that like the big thing in this chapter in terms of the exposition is that we learn that there are no city lights, which when I was first reading it, I was like, oh, that's an interesting detail right off the bat, and she's the main character who I believe is like 15 at the time, at the start of the book. She's talking with her stepmom basically about, the stars because they can see the stars. There's no light pollution. And her stepmom is basically just like, yeah, the stars are nice, but I would prefer the city lights. And hopefully they're back on soon, So I think that like off the bat, that kind of tells us like, one, we're in a world where for some reason there are no city lights and there should be. And people do expect them to come back, which is, good. But the piece of this chapter that I think is the most notable is that Octavia Butler starts it with the main character. Her name is Lauren Olamina, has a dream, a recurring dream, she says, where she's basically like learning to fly. She's trying to teach herself to fly. And then all of a sudden she can't fly and she's trapped in a burning house. And I won't spoil anything beyond that. But what I will say is that fire is big it's an obstacle later on in the story in a multitude of ways. So I think that really stands out to me and is interesting for 2 reasons. One, within the context of the story, it's just, plain and clear foreshadowing. The main character dreams of fire and has to deal with fire later on. But I think that it's also, a lot of this book I feel like is like Octavia directly speaking through this character, like using it as a mouthpiece. And in that way, I think it's interesting because like this is a dream. This is a dream that Octavia Butler had, this book. And lo and behold, like it's all coming true, and so I don't know. You could say that she did that on purpose, but I think that is just an added layer to that detail that makes it much makes it richer to me. And that's why I said that, Cherie, that was a great segue, because I think like really off the top, you've got this theme of like foreshadowing, of predicting the future, of like prescience. And so yeah, it's just like a really strong start for a book where that's such a deep part of the story. So, but yeah, I'll open it up if there are any questions or other thoughts or reflections on that first chapter.
And Lauren she's 15. She's a teenager. So she's young when we first meet her in in the book. Yeah.
I think that that's another thing that's interesting because, she's young throughout the book, um, and it's really honestly like, as far as the storytelling goes, a stroke of luck that she ends up having to like really start to face the world at like 18, as an adult. But I think that like something that's clear throughout the book is that really, at least in her mind, she's much older than 15 or 18 or however, like for a long time, just because like we said, no street lights, as we'll get into. It's rough, in this world for our main character. So yeah, it's like, and I think a lot of people who've grown up in sort of like a rougher upbringing, a rougher environment can really relate to that, just like feeling wizened, aged by your surroundings, like, you've experienced more than you should have to or would ever want to. And that's definitely a big part of, and I think that, that's doubly true for Lauren, both because of the situation, but also because where she's like uniquely placed in relationship to her community. We'll learn about this a little bit later, but her father's a pastor. He's a community leader. He's a very influential voice in the community. And with her being his oldest daughter, I believe, I think his oldest child, when not only is she like older than a lot of the other children, she has like some sort of like, influence or authority sometimes over them as like their, big sister figure, caretaker in the community. But, she has to fill in for her father a lot. She like learns his sermons, like, say he's sick or something, she does the service, and, she speaks and so it's like that, it's just that extra layer of, hey, she's also a big sister, so it's that like extra layer of responsibility, that not just like being in a tough situation gives you, but also being like a leader and an influential figure in your community, gives you that as well. So
Now, before I get into I want the the spoiler warning police to check me. In the first 6 chapters, do they talk about her condition?
yes.
Okay, cool. No, yeah, I think that was really what stood out to me about the book in the very beginning is that Lauren is an empath, and one so strongly that she's made ill or incapacitated when faced with like people or experiences that she can emote with very immediately. So it's both an advantage and a disadvantage for her in real time. And I think when I think about the state of the world in the book and where it is at now, I think that's the biggest difference for me is that people in our world presently have blocked out their emotions so viciously that they wouldn't treat others' feelings as something that could cause them harm or even bring them joy. So that was like what stood out.
I'll say for me that the first chapter and even second, third, it's an interesting context between one generation and another. So her stepmother, Corey, and her dad, they grew up in a more stable time and things changed. And so because of that, I think that they are rooted to certain ways of looking at the world, perceiving the world. But because she grew up in a time where, it was much more fearful, things had deteriorated, and also she's young, that there's a lot more questioning going on. And I think that a lot of times, or I guess I would say, I think that those kind of things are really what moves a generation and a people forward when there are crises or challenges and young people have to deal with it and they begin to question, like the perspective of their elders and how they deal with stuff, and then also try to look at what may be good about it and what needs to change. And so for me, I just felt like, that introduction with her mom saying, "Oh, I'd rather have street lights." And she like talked about how she had been learned about the stars and the constellations. So again, I think it's because the mom looks at it more in the context of safety and always having felt safe. But Lauren came up in this time where she's clearly aware about the issues of safety and things like that and what she has to do. But also she's like questioning and looking at and thinking about stuff. And also she has parents who also like her dad, which I really resonate with because I was raised by my dad. He's like teaching everybody that they need to protect themselves and learn how to shoot, and that you can't necessarily rely on others. And so you have to take initiative too. And so for me, it was just interesting to see that, I guess, at the beginning, sort of intergenerational contrast.
Yeah, I noticed that that was beautifully said because the generational relationships really stood out to me too. And she was forced to be a caretaker from such a young age. And I think that caretaking is what gave her maybe the empath nature. I mean, it goes together, right? I'm just curious as to how I'm very curious to watch her grow and develop.
Yeah, I was gonna add one thing that maybe transitions us into the second chapter a little bit. And chapter one is short, so if those two melt together, no worries. The chapters kind of get longer as the book goes on, which is interesting. But Z kind of mentioned Lauren's empathy, and something that I want to like clarify and just add is that like it's not empathy as we think about it. It's not like empathy that makes her sick. Like her empathy is the sickness. It's something that they call in the story hyper empathy syndrome, and it's something that she inherited from her mother, who has passed away by the start of the story, who died in childbirth. But she inherited it from her mother because her mother was addicted to this like focus drug that basically passes on this congenital illness that makes it so that you can basically feel other people's pain and pleasure. So it's yeah, I think that, and I'm going to read this is such a perfect book. There's a reading group. There are reading group questions and topics for discussion in the back. So I'm going to read the first question in that section. But Lauren Olamina has hyperempathy syndrome, an illness that gives her the delusion that she feels both the pain and pleasure of those around her. Do you think it is significant that this is a congenital disease she contracted because her mother was a drug abuser? How has this illness made Lauren different from those around her? Why was she unable to tell anyone about it? Why do you suppose it is significant to the story that she has this illness? So, um, yeah. So I do have an answer to at least one of those questions. We don't have to like dig into them necessarily, but just like be thinking about those things maybe as we like, continue this conversation. But yeah, anything else anybody wanted to share on that part before I jump back in?
It's just that the novel, I feel like the novel is so powerful because not only does it give us like these kind of nuanced examinations of what it means to be young and what girlhood look like, right? How Lauren doesn't embrace all the traditional ideals of what that means. One, because it doesn't make sense in the world that she's faced in right now, right? That she has to address. So she has to make some choices on how she's going to be and what have you. But also, I feel like Octavia Butler was, this was published in 1993, right? So she took some time to write it, but it did come out in 93. And so we've already gone through the whole, quote, crack era and everything, right? I don't think people were aware of
Yes.
political implications of it or how the government was a part of that as well, right? But that drug addiction already, had taken a great number of people. And we've always had drug addiction in America for the most part, to be honest. But to that level, it was an epidemic, right? And so the way that Octavia Butler chose to write about how this illness ravaged not only the society, but had an impact on the main characters of the novel. I think that was really powerful too. And also the fact that Lauren herself will be affected by a health condition that her mother had, right? And that's something that's going to be a major thing in terms of what's happening all around her, what she has to navigate, and the other citizens have to navigate in a place that no longer has cities in the way that we think of it, doesn't have the utility structures anymore. Everything is natural light, right? And I think her stepmother says that, she wants the city lights back, but at least the stars are free, right? So you have like this social drama that you're dealing with, the threat of violence, right? And then an empath who has to feel all this stuff, and then the environmental collapse, the climate stuff that's happening. So it's a lot going on in Parable of the Sower. Yeah.
Hopefully you guys can hear me. Hey everybody. Yeah, that part around her
Hey, Chin, I think
hello.
Cassandra was gonna say something, dear.
Oh, go for it, Cass.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. I just wanted to put in there like the things. What I really noticed is like the things they do for safety. I feel like the reason why they keep her illness, as they call it, like under wraps, is because for safety reasons. Um, because I feel like they feel like if someone did find out about it, then they're scared that someone will try to take advantage of that. And also with like the street lights, I feel like in their generation and her parents' generation, that was like a sense of safety. I feel like this is why we have so many street lights, in certain areas, because we feel like it deters um um like the thievery, stealing, killing. Like we think that if like there's a light there, then no darkness can get through. So I feel like I feel like a big theme of this book is the um what is a person willing to do for safety or to feel safe. And I feel like in this day, like even the decisions that we make them so we can feel safe, so we can feel some type of safety. I feel like a lot of people voted for the person in the president in the book because they felt as if he could take them to an era where they felt safe and secure. And as I read more into the book, I just noticed that it's like, yeah, like we really do some strange things. Um, Now, I wouldn't even say even strange things. But we do go through to certain lengths for security and safety.
Thank you, Cass. Let's go, J. Rue, and then Donna.
Hey, yeah, I appreciate you bringing that point up around like safety, Cass, 'cause I definitely agree. Um, people struggling for peace of mind and what people are willing to do to achieve peace of mind. I think that's kind of linked to the piece I was going to speak on, which was like her hyper empathy being a strength. There's a saying where like if you share your joy with me, it's double the joy. But if you share your pain with me, it's only half the pain. And she doesn't really have that luxury because even if, one of her friends or one of her people in her group is injured in some way, she feels that too. And she has to keep it under wraps because that's something that can be easily taken advantage of by people who do not have that same level of empathy. And I find that part very, very interesting, especially in this current age. Because of course, Octavia Butler passed away before the internet was even close to its current shape and form.
Mm-hmm.
And it's always been interesting to me the way that the internet and social media and how we're able to share knowledge and information and visuals um, has both increased the level of empathy around the world, I would say, in some ways. I think you can see that in like Gaza and Palestine. I mean that's still an atrocity, don't get me wrong. But in other time periods, you would see millions of people getting slaughtered for whatever political reason. And it would just hit the papers months and months later, and people kind of had to react to it then. You know what I mean? There was maybe a couple levels of distance between you and that particular event. But now it's right up in your face all the time. And it's kind of like a two-sided coin because while that does create another level of empathy and another avenue through which we can care for one another, I know in my experience, it's also been somewhat disheartening and also just like immensely uh heavy is the word I would use to just be, in my case, I would say like inundated and just hit with it all the time. So I felt very connected to her in that sense where it's like other people's pain, you cannot just walk away, or at least I can't walk away from stuff like that. So how do you manage that in a healthy way? How do you manage that in a very hostile environment? I was definitely resonating with that piece.
Thank you, J. Rue. Take it, Donna.
I feel like just on the topic of her hyperempathy, they treat it in the book like a disability, where they're just kind of like, don't tell anybody that you have it, like this is a bad thing. All it
Mm.
can do is like harm you essentially. And I think in a lot of ways, like there are opportunities from the society that she's in to like learn from her, like learn from the experiences that she's like going through, but like everyone just kind of like shuts it down and tries to figure out ways to like work around it. And it just kind of has me thinking about how disability in general is, for the most part, determined by the demands of the society that you live in. And I think that in the world that Octavia Butler has built, like hyper empathy, like is something where it's like you can't continue to just like power through in the way that you need to if you're in tune with what you're actually seeing around you. And so that's why people are responding as though her hyper empathy is a disability. And then something that Cass said also just kind of reminded me of like a personal anecdote, and it had to do with like the street lights being off, but also the idea of like everybody is still convinced that they're going to come back on. And I was in South Carolina and lived in South Carolina when Helene came through, and there was kind of this realization that I was like experiencing of like everybody in the city lost power. The whole city lost power. A lot of the state lost power. And there was this thought of like, okay, like when are they gonna fix it? When's it gonna come back on? But there is like also this thought that hit me for the first time of like, it doesn't have to come back on. Like this could be how it is. And for some places too, like even after we eventually did get power, which was like a week later, like they're not close to downtown. And so like they were still, it's kind of looming as like, will this ever change? Like, will some sort of entity like the government or somebody who like is supposed to have this responsibility like come back and like fix this thing? And so that was just kind of like an interesting parallel of like these people still kind of have hope in this larger institution that's supposed to like come get the streetlights back up and running, but like it's like you see the sun rise every day and you think it's gonna happen again tomorrow, but like I don't know,
You
comes a
never
point in
know.
time where like that might not be true.
Yeah. Let's go Alvin and then Tom, and then I want to jump in because J. Rue and Donna were speaking my language. So take it, Alvin.
Hello. It's actually Mimi undercover as Alvin.
Oh, hi, Mimi. Mimi,
Hi.
check in, please.
Oh, okay. I feel like this conversation has me up to like an 8.
Yay!
Yeah, I was probably like a 5 before. So thank you. Like a glowing California poppy orange. I do not like spoilers. I would prefer to experience things just as like the creator of that content put it out and then discuss other people's perspectives about it. Um,
How much of the
and
book have you read?
oh, I read this whole book and I read Parable of the Talents, and I've
Perfect.
also read some short stories by Octavia Butler, and I really love her. Um, and Um, yeah, I think in the book, the way she writes about the hyper empathy as a condition, as an illness, I think is she's clear about how the society views it and how it really is a major challenge, in really practical ways where like if she sees somebody get shot, she basically dies for a little bit, just like physically and emotionally. And that's really real. She can't see other people's like injuries without being debilitated. But I also think that in the storytelling, Lauren Olamina is such a powerful leader and also community builder. And I think in the storytelling, you see how her hyper empathy actually plays into her strength as a leader in knowing her people very deeply.
Yes.
Yeah, so I think that that shines through, and even though she does frame it through the challenges and the experience of her society, she also demonstrates how it is a strength in leadership.
Strength and vulnerability.
Yeah.
And that made me ask the question, is it feeling other people's pain a delusion?
Right. Yeah. I'm like,
Real.
she
That's
question.
real.
I don't
Hey
know.
man, I just read what they put in the book, man. I
Right.
don't know.
But
Yeah.
I think they call it a delusion because in chapter 1, she said her brother puts, I don't know what it's, ketchup on him or something like that. And she was
Yeah.
feeling hurt and found out that he wasn't really hurt and she beat him up. So I would, but I think they were
And it
saying
hurt her to
that
do so.
Really
in
hurting.
her
Yeah.
mind,
I don't
she
care.
empathizes with anybody that she feels is hurt, whether it's real or not. But I wouldn't delusion
Thank
it.
you.
But yeah.
Yeah, that's an important
I
distinction.
I also wanted to share, so on the piece that Donna said, it's really real, because like I think it's not too much of a stretch to say it's obvious to a lot of people that we're living through a certain kind of collapse, at a major level, like in the US and then globally. And it's definitely something that I've thought about and processed for a long time, especially sort of similar to Octavia Butler, just looking at the trends and being like, where could this possibly lead? And I had a dream a few years ago, and it was like years down the road. It was a little bit it was a little bit post-apocalyptic, but like I was living here where I am, and there was like a very large houseless community, that was just sort of all around and in different ways kind of integrated with those who lived in houses, and certain ways that those communities navigated each other. But there was also this thing that was going on where planes were just falling out of the sky.
Uh-oh.
And like you would see like planes fall out of the sky, and then you could hear on the news like them talking about it, and it was kind of like, and like the trial has been delayed again until July, and like there was no like real accountability. And then like this last year there's been a lot more experiences with like crazy stuff happening on planes. And like this idea that Donna was talking about of like, yeah, what if there never is like quote unquote accountability, or like another entity that comes in to quote fix like these situations that we deal with? And I just think that's so real and washing
Yeah.
over people at different levels, and people who are experiencing like natural disasters like the fires in LA, and
Yeah.
Hurricane Helene are on the front end of that experience. But I think it's something that we are all reckoning with and going to have to reckon with. So
Yeah.
I really appreciate you bringing that up and like your actual experience living through that. Um, I'm like impacted that you experienced that firsthand, and I thank you for sharing it, because
Yeah.
that is very traumatic and also something that is broader and that I think we can all learn from.
It gets too real sometimes, man. It gets too real.
Yeah.
What did you have, Tom?
Just I, I guess I didn't really catch that her gift was a disability. And I didn't think that she sort of framed it that way. It kind of what made her special, that hyper empathy syndrome. At least that's I guess that's what I read into it, or that's what I got out of it when I read it. And as Pambana pointed out, she had to protect herself because her brother did pull that prank on her, pissed her off, and that was really kind of cute because it talks about sibling dynamics and stuff. That's real regular human interaction stuff. It's not this sci-fi stuff that's, who can think of this? She takes really everyday sort of things and really with her gift, Octavia's gift as a writer, um, transforms them into something much more relevant to many more people. Like she gives a whole new sort of sense of what a gated community is, for
Yeah.
example,
Yeah.
that sort of thing. And those were happening back then. Gated communities were not new or invented, but she put a real interesting take on it that I thought is part of what makes her such a great writer. But one thing I have noticed is that, and Jay Rue sort of touched on this though about the internet and thing, is that and I won't call this a failing or anything, but because who could know? But the communication devices that are used, for example, and you got to remember the power's down and all that sort of stuff. So they may have had other types of communication, but they were like using transistor radios and things like that
Yeah.
to stay. And I certainly remember transistor radios, but I mean, so that was, and I don't consider that a flaw or failing, but it helps define the era very specifically in a way that makes it say, okay, what would happen to, I think about this, what would happen if all of our communication devices went down? What would that do for us? We're so dependent on that dopamine
Yes.
rush and everything.
Yeah.
And if that's gone, what does that do to us? And then how would we protect ourselves? Okay.
Jeru said it frees us. Okay.
Liberates us.
Liberates us. Yeah. Okay. I'm gonna try to keep my thoughts in order because there were just so many good points, and I have so many thoughts to all of them. So I'm gonna work backward. First, Tom, I think that observation about first of all, the observation about the technology and part about the gated community for our friends who haven't read that far. Something that's revealed in the second chapter is that Lauren's whole neighborhood is within this huge wall with like razor wire and broken glass at the top, and you can only get in if you have a key to the gate, and that's basically to keep out a lot of people who keep out the world, a lot of people who are desperate and trying to get their stuff. So like that piece about the gated communities, I hadn't even thought about that. That's so deep. I think the piece about the technology is interesting because I think that it's also, on the one hand, yes, it talks about like the technology of the era, but on the other hand, I think that there's also this sort of idea that, sometimes like older technology, like technology that's maybe a little bit less advanced is more durable and more reliable, especially like in this smartphone era, this touchscreen era where if your screen goes out, you can't do anything on your device. You used to have buttons and knobs on things that you could use, but now, if the touchscreen is down, you're dead. So I think that that's there's that commentary on like technology throughout, but the main thing that I wanted to touch on was something that and then I want us to kind of like move into chapter 3, although please continue sharing your chapter 1 and 2 thoughts, but mainly has to do with what Jay Rue said about the heaviness of empathy. It has to do with Donna said about hyper empathy as a disability and the ways that like, people try to run away from it instead of learning from it. And then it has to do with what Mimi said about hyper empathy being like the a sort of like an anchor in Lauren's community building practice, right? Because, like, to me, I think that I hear what you said, Tom, about it being a gift, and I hear what you said, J. Rue, about it being heavy. Because on the one hand, like, yeah, you cannot like there's one thing that they say in the book where it's like, basically it shouldn't hurt to defend yourself. It shouldn't be painful to protect yourself from somebody inflicting harm on you. And yet it is for her, like Mimi said, if she watches somebody die, she dies for a second, which in a combat scenario is bad, but there's two things that I think. One, as the story develops, you see her build a community around her that learns to learn from this, that learns to support her through this, people who will pick her up when she drops, people who will make sure that that this thing that they cannot get rid of, that they cannot ignore, does not jeopardize the community or the mission. And I think that, like, in a lot of ways, that is what it means to, um, support community members with disabilities. You make sure that they are not left behind. You make sure that those things are not a hindrance to the best of your ability. And to my second point, you learn from them when you can, because the other thing is that I think that the hyper empathy forces them to be much more careful about how they interact with other people in the world. Something that, like, is a constant theme throughout the book is that, like, people dissolve into madness when they are, like, in these desperate situations. They become predators, like they prey on other people, like literally at some points, like they prey on other people. And what the hyper empathy does is that makes that not an option for this community. Like Lauren cannot prey on other people because that is her preying on herself. And so I think in some ways, while yes, it is something that can be a disadvantage, as many new evolutionary adaptations are in some cases. I think in another way, it's almost like Octavia Butler is saying that, like, this form of being, of relating to other people, of empathy, where you cannot inflict harm on another person without taking some of that harm on yourself, is crucial to how we survive in what's coming, because we need to be able to hold other people's pain and still move forward, but also understand that, like, what I do to you, I do to myself. And so, like, if we're going to build a world with, like, more sustainable, more reciprocal relationships, we kind of have to have some hyper empathy of our own. But real quick, I'm going to bring us into chapter 3. Um, uh, by saying, like, along with that introduction of the gated community in chapter 2, there's this conversation about religion starts, because Lauren basically says that, like, her dad is religious. I think she's like Baptist or Catholic or Baptist. Yeah, he's Baptist. And they all get their baptisms. Yay. But Lauren basically says, like, my dad's religion for a long time now has not been my religion. And I'm trying to build my own religion based off of some of what his religion has taught me, some of what I've observed, some of what I've read of other books. And that is the beginning of what is introduced in the third chapter, which, among other things, is Lauren's concept of God. She hasn't put together her name for the religion yet. That doesn't come until, I think, like chapter 7 or something. It's not in my notes for the first six chapters, but basically in chapter 3, um, it opens up with Lauren's watching this news story about an astronaut on a Mars mission who has died because something went wrong with her spacesuit. And she starts off with, oh, going to space is stupid. There are so many people here who can't feed themselves or have nowhere to live, and they're trying to go to space. Why would they do that? But then we learn that, one, their walls, super big, super dangerous, not impervious. We learn that somebody has broken into the community, robbed one of their community members, and trigger warning for self-harm, like, one of that community member who was robbed, takes her own life. She's an older woman and she just can't handle it. So we get another element of this hardship that they're dealing with. We learn more about their situation. And, basically Lauren, like, in her grief over this lost community member, and also as she's processing, like, this changing political climate, because there's a new election coming up, like or somebody talked about, like, they elect this new guy because they think he'll make them safe and blah, 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 blah. But she's looking at all these changes, all these things that are, maybe they're going to get better, maybe you're going to get worse. And what she comes to is this idea that God is change. Her idea of God is that it is the force of change in the world, and that becomes the religious doctrine that she adopts and follows throughout the rest of the story. So I think maybe I want to pass it to Cherie now a little bit to speak on that point, because I think that that's really one of the big core philosophical principles, and, like, one of the big themes of this book is, like, change as God, change as this, like, ultimate force in the universe that is responsible for shaping all of our lives and the world around us. So yeah.
Yeah, I'm trying to navigate how to talk about it without all these so-called spoilers.
Do your best. Just do your best.
Like, how do you talk about a book without without talking about the book? But the Lauren's ideal of God begins to evolve from the traditional background. And it's interesting that you should know that also Octavia had this traditional background as well of I believe it was of Christianity, particularly Baptist, upbringing as well, right? So there's a sense of disillusionment that happens, right? And Lauren begins to express that that this kind of she's beginning to move a little bit differently from the Christianity that was practiced by her father in their community. And she's living in this like dystopian world, right? That seems very familiar to some of us today, right? And she's questioning the existence of a benevolent God, you know, which is not the first time anyone on the planet has probably questioned that. You have this world of suffering and injustice. Well, where is the benevolent God to make the suffering go away or to ease it, right? And so this skepticism that she's starting to have, I think, is rooted in her physicality. It's not just the environment that she's in, but it's rooted in the hyper empathy that she has, because she's getting the visceral experience of other people's suffering and the other people's pain. And it's making it really difficult for her on a physical level, not just an abstract philosophical level, to kind of reconcile with this ideal of a benevolent God who's supposed to be loving and protective. So I think that's the first seed, and we probably should talk about what the parable of the sower is in the Christian Bible, what it actually is, and what the metaphor it is that Octavia uses throughout this novel. The other thing is that, so she begins to think about this sense of God as change, and she develops a belief system around it, right? Do you want to talk about that, or do we want to name it, or let them discover it?
Let's let them discover the name, but we can talk about the belief system a little bit. I think God is change is really what it comes down to. So
Yeah. So this is ideal. Like if you think about your own life, and I'm just talking about the people here in this group discussion. If you think about what your life was like a year ago, and you try to think of maybe one or two things that were different about you from last year that are different now or are going to be different, that you're determined to make them different, right? And think about how you'll feel if you actually change those things in a positive way, right? If you are successful in making and moving the goalposts and changing it and reaching your goal, right? That's sort of a way to describe the way Lauren Olamina begins to think about God. She's thinking about it as this, not just this kind of benevolent force that's distant or watching us go through suffering, but this force that's actually a part of us, that is a part of our everyday environment, a part of our chosen family units, and that it's part of our community, and that we are part, like the stars in the universe and everything else, we are shaping and reshaping everything around us by our effort, by us actually daring to be brave and to do the hard work of not being static, but of being dynamic and trying to evolve as people and being a part of nature in doing that. So she begins to really see herself. Remember, she's 15. She's coming of age. This is a coming of age novel under some extraordinary circumstances, right, that are now becoming normalized, right, or have become normalized over the past 30 years since this book was published, right, 1993. It's this ideal that we really, each of us, we have some form of human agency, and we have a responsibility to use that human agency to shape our futures and not just wait on some other supernatural force or divine force to do it for us. That we have to figure out and be smart and be collaborative and figure out how we can believe in ourselves and each other to solve these problems and to influence the world around us. So that's like, so she's really doing a lot more in terms of not just testifying about, oh, God is good all the time, but actually showing how the good that is part of God is also a good that's part of us, and that we can be that change in the world and shape our own destinies. So in that way, Lauren was kind of rejecting the ideals that her pastor father and others had. It was very different than what the expression of it was very different than how they were expressing it. It doesn't mean that people aren't doing community service and that kind of thing, but she was really putting beginning to put the onus of change on us as individual people. And I think that's the thing that started making the plot start popping.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, because she starts coming across this, like, to them, this kind of weird way of seeing the world. And they got real problems. They got real problems. They're not just doing these philosophical, mind exercises. They got real problems that they're facing, right? And they're in danger. But she's thinking about, okay, how can we really start changing this situation around us in ourselves and then moving outward from that. So it's a kind of it's a spiritual perspective, but it's a pragmatic spirituality.
I want to add, oh, let's go Mama Pambana and then Donna, and then I want to add something to that.
Okay. So, like in the book, there's like these two, I guess you would say, poems. And the one that I'm just reading said, God is power, infinite, irresistible,
Yep.
inexorable, indifferent, and yet God is pliable, trickster, teacher, chaos, clay. God exists to be shaped, God is changed. So for me, I feel like a lot of times, maybe in religions, they try to always focus on, let's say, God is benevolent. They don't focus on, or they don't acknowledge that there are terrible things that happen, and if they do, they don't attribute that to God. And she says God is both. But then she goes on in the next chapter, or chapter 4, where she talks about you can be a victim or you can work with God and be a partner. And so, like, again, like Cherie said, it's this thing about, well, it's neither good or bad. Change is both. But how you take agency, respond to it, and what you do determines, I think, more of the impact or effect. But not you may not always have that. So, like, I think about the slave trade, like, people tried to resist it, but we didn't have the tools or technology to fully resist it. And so there's a lot of trauma, pain, and suffering that results from that. But I think, again, the power of people to take agency is what has allowed people to continue to resist and struggle and to move forward, versus having an attitude, well, I can't do nothing about it, so I'm just let people abuse me and that kind of stuff. So for me, I feel like it kind of talks about that life is both good and bad, but you have to decide if you're going to take it or if you're going to try to use your agency to make it better, and not just for yourself but for others as well.
Well said. What did you have, Donna?
I just think that, I guess, like, her philosophy, or like her like religion and like mixed with her identity, is just something that's like really interesting to me, because she's 15, so she's a child, she's Black, and also she's like a girl. And I think that, like, because of these things, like, it's just kind of interesting that, like, she chose this belief system that emphasizes agency, and like it ends up being kind of an issue to like the adults in her life later on, and to just like men in her family even later on, where it's just kind of like, well, you're a child and you're a girl, so like why are you kind of being this way? But um also just like in direct conflict with her dad's religion, as you mentioned, because her whole philosophy is just kind of like faith is not a plan and like hope is not a plan.
Yeah.
And so, like, while you can have those things, sure, if you want, like, how am I going to affect the world around me? Um, and so I don't know. That's just something that's a little bit like humorous to me, like the mixture of all of those things together.
Very well said. Yeah, and the point that I was going to add was the exact piece that Mama Pambana add. The point of that poem, like as soon as they introduce this concept of God as change, they're introducing this concept of like change is something that we can be a part of as well. Um, that's an Octavia Butler quote. In fact, I think at one point she says to somebody basically like that there's no one answer or silver bullet to fix all of our problems. There are a lot of answers, and we can be answers if we want to be, but um, just for the sake of time, I want to move us into chapter 4. We got a 15-minute video that we're going to play at the end, so I want to make sure that we have time for that and have time to get through the other chapters. But and then I'm gonna start picking on people who haven't gone yet. So, but in chapter 4, first I'll say the book starts in 2024. By chapter 4, they've made it to 2025, and 2025 starts with wildfires blazing through California in February, though, not in January. So I guess we're safe. Um, A few big things that I want to like lay out for this chapter is like one, this idea that they cannot afford the firefighters, troubling. Um, Two is we get introduced to more of the community. And this piece is interesting to me because it's like it is not a perfect community by any means. It is full of people that by our standards would not be people that you want to build relationships with. But they're all you got. So you got to make it work. So we learn about the Dunn family, for example. Amy Dunn, who is the youngest, a product of incest and sexual abuse, in that family. We learn about the Mosses as well, who is like a polygamous family, with like one man with multiple wives because he believes that that's right. But hey, that's who we got. And then the community member who took her life in the previous chapter, her cousins move into her house, and there's some friction there because they don't trust the people of the community. The people of the community don't trust them. And then we learn about we learn a little bit more about the outside. We learn that there are packs of feral dogs running around and eating people, and feasting on corpses. And we learn about that as the kids in the group are being taken by the adults to learn how to shoot guns, because that is seen as a crucial skill for people to have, especially because, as we'll talk about in the future chapters, they can't work with the police either. So yeah, I'm gonna pass it to maybe a few people who haven't spoken quite as much. So let me see. Remind me of your name one more time. Bill. So Bill, yeah, let's go with you, Bill. Anything you want to share?
I don't know. I'm kind of jotting things down as I'm kind of thinking about them. And again, I haven't read the book yet, so I'm 9 chapters in or so. But I do wonder how. Just thought I had, since her hyper empathy, it's not like a superpower, right? It's her perception of somebody's pain that she feels. Like her brother's faking her out was like proof of that, right? And so it's interesting to think maybe, I mean, all of her hyper empathy we're seeing through her lens of her perception of what's happening around her, not really what's actually happening. Like she can't really feel what people's pain is. She just feels what she thinks people's pain are. And so I just don't know if that'll play a role later on as we see things. It's all through her lens, if that makes sense.
How do you know her lens isn't the truth?
Well, I think because
It's her truth.
sure, but it's not. It may not be the reality.
Yeah, I've never read the book. You've read more than me. I'm just wondering, like her brother faked her out, but she was still feeling that fear. It might have been fake to him, but it wasn't fake to her. I don't know.
Sure, she felt what she perceived he was feeling.
But she
So
still
I'm not
perceived
saying she
it.
may not feel it.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I'm not trying to.
I'm not either.
No, I think that's good. No, just set it down. Yeah, no, and I think that tension is very real, right? Because it's this idea of like the idea of a subjective reality versus an objective reality. Like is there even a such thing? Is just because it's real to one person and not real to another person doesn't mean that it's real or not real objectively, quote unquote. I think that is a very old philosophical debate. So
But it is it is her story. So we have to take it as her story and the reality. Um, I think it's interesting in this chapter, she brings in intellect and speaks to the power and possible harm of intellect versus, the feeling and the faith that we had been talking about leading up to this and the perception. So I'm excited to keep reading because everything is, meeting the intellect and the emoting, all of it in between.
it's a really good book. Let's maybe hear from we've got something in the chat. Before Yeah, yeah. Thanks, Alvin. Yeah, maybe we can go around before we finish up and have folks share that real quick. Oh, I see a hand from Stephanie. Stephanie, please.
Hey everyone. One thing I wanted to share. We're in chapter 5, right? Am I right? Maddie?
Chapter, yeah, take us there. Go for it.
Oh, okay. Well, this struck me as something I feel like Kepra really does well. It's the bottom of page 58, at least in my copy. I want you to be serious. I realize I don't know very much. None of us knows very much, but we can all learn more. Then we can teach one another. We can stop denying reality or hoping it will go away by magic. And that just really struck me with where we are, but also the community that we're a part of.
Remind me your name one more time. Charlotte. Yeah, I think that also reminds me of the piece that Charlotte was talking about with intellect, you know? And yeah, like in chapter 5, there's this exchange where um, Lauren basically shares some of her thoughts and ideas with, you know, a friend of hers, someone that she thinks is a friend, and basically her idea being that we should start preparing for things to get really bad because our wishful thinking will not keep us safe. And in the end, this really freaks her friend out, and her friend tells her parents, and she gets in trouble. But I do think there is one of my favorite quotes in the book is when Lauren says something along the lines of like, "I'm learning everything I can, and I know that none of it will ever be enough." Basically, you know, it's like this idea that like, yeah, intellect can only take us so far. You know, like we can prepare ourselves as much as we can, but even if we make ourselves as prepared and we can possibly be, we will always be unprepared for the unexpected. So, yeah, but we still got to prepare anyway. And I see a hand from Alvin or Mimi, so I'll pass it that way, and then Cass after them.
Right on. That part is one that has continued to stick out to me over the years, where she like tells her friend the real stuff that she's looking at, and then her dad has this talk with her, and he's sort of like, "You're not wrong, but also freaking people the F out may not be effective at the outcomes you're looking for," basically, is my interpretation of what he shares with her. And I am really into this idea of discernment, where different moments call for different things, and many realities exist at once. And how do you be present enough and make the best choice you can in each moment? And it's something I really struggle with. And the the tension between telling the truth as you see it in all of its realness, no matter how overwhelming it may be. You can't handle the truth, like with the realness of how information impacts people and what it leads to, um, and what you may hope to do in sharing information and collaborating and moving into a space of agency, but how people also tend to move from a space of fear. That just really has stuck with me all the years. I'm glad you pulled that part out of this chapter.
Yeah. Let's go Cass and then Donna, and then I'm gonna pass it to let's say Keenan after that.
Yeah, to piggyback off of that, I just found it interesting that she got in trouble for that. And I just feel like when I sat and thought about it, I just feel like it's because she was, her parents taught her a different way. Like her parents wanted to be, it, her parents want it to be a different way than when she's seeing it. Um, she can't help the fact that she has grown up and she has seen, what her parents taught, and she can't help the fact that she's going a different way because in her mind she's adapting. I feel like in a way they're clinging on to an old way of being, and she's just like, well, you keep saying that it's going to get better, but I've the way I've grown up, I've seen things, it just gets worse. So instead of trying to go back to where we were, trying to, I feel like this is why she's clinged on to God has changed, because she's like, well, we have to adapt, we have to move on. Like those days are done. We have to make, a different way. And I just feel like the people don't want to hear it because they're like, no, we want it to go back to where it was. Those were our golden ages. Like how we are now and how people think that like they think like what the 1920s or 1930s were our golden ages, and people want to go back to that, but a lot of us are like, no, like we need to move forward. We need to adjust. And I just feel like um that part of the book is so real to me because like um I've been in that predicament where I'm like, well, we need to adapt, we need to change. And then I had like an adult tell me, oh no, this is what's wrong with this iteration. Y'all just wanna, go against the grain. And I don't think it's really going against the grain. I feel like it's just you're you're trying to evolve because nothing is ever going to be the same, you know? So like I don't know. I feel like that part of the book was really struck me because I was just like she's trying like I get that she doesn't have the same beliefs of you as her parents, but it's because she's trying to evolve. She doesn't want to be stuck in a world that she doesn't even know about. Like she didn't grow up in that time, so she doesn't even know what that is. So she's trying to make her own way because she's never seen that way of living. All she knows is, well, things just keep getting worse. So instead of trying to go back to where we were, we should try to prepare and adjust so that we can live and survive for the future.
Thank you, Cass. What you got, Donna?
I actually love that conversation that she had with her dad, and I think that I see it differently. Like, I don't think that she even really got in trouble, honestly, for like the reasons that I assumed that she would when her friend first like told on her. That was the first conversation where I was like, okay, somebody's actually on the same page as she is because her dad,
Mm-hmm.
I think, was coming from the realm of like, I have wisdom about this community. And while yes,
Yeah.
you are right, and we do need to prepare, and we do need to fight, and we do need to be able to have go bags, and we do need to have like these things in order, like the way that you want to approach it is not going to get people to move their feet in the direction you think it is. Like, yes,
Mm-hmm.
this knowledge is wise to have, but that's not how you mobilize people. That's how you shell shock people. And I think that I've had that conversation with like my friends in my community and like with myself, which is why it just resonated so much to me because it is like, well, there's all of this information out here. Like, we need to do something with it, you know? But it's like people in reality have like traumas and nervous systems and attachments and things that they can't just like immediately up and take this information in a way that they can like synthesize it and transform it into something immediately. Like, you do have to do, and this is also a thing that like really kind of still bothers me morally sometimes, but it's a little bit of manipulation of like, hey, let's just learn how to defend ourselves for no reason at all. Like, let's
Mm-hmm.
learn Taekwondo, just for funsies. And that's kind of the approach that he was trying to take. And I think that Lauren felt as though it wasn't like fast and immediate enough. He was just kind of like, if we want it to be efficient, this is the only way that it's gonna happen because we can't just do it now.
Yeah.
Um, but again, like I do have some issues with that sometimes because it does feel like manipulation of other people where you're like, I want you to have a go bag. Like, I want you to be prepared. I want you to learn how to do this thing so that we can all collectively survive. But like not necessarily sharing like your full motivations. But yeah, I really liked that conversation. I think that that's when I was like, okay, somebody sees what she sees, and he's actually not delusional. But yeah.
Yeah, that was a piece that definitely stands out to me as well, just like that. Um, when I first got into this community organizing piece in a conscious way, of course doing it unconsciously for many years, but doing it in a conscious way, being young and you start hearing some things, and your mind starts changing about some things. You're like, oh no, I'm ready to tear it down. I'm ready to blow this whole thing up right now. I'm coming after everybody right now. Take me to the state house right now.
Oh, calm down.
I mean, for peaceful protest, of course. But yeah, so it's easy to get really fired up. But exactly to your point, Donna, most people are not going to get fired up that quickly. They're going to be shell shocked. They're probably going to be even more averse. And there is always going to be a resistance to new information when it's not put in the proper context in the proper place. As Mimi was talking about things like discernment, and it made me think of kind of the approach that this particular community has taken, this community being Kepra, where it's really a lead by example, and those who are in search of that will find you. If you are looking to make change, then start making change with who you are, where you are, with what you have. And people who resonate with that, they'll get on board and they'll join you and they'll continue on with that. And as the environment begins to change, kind of like how you see it now, people will become more receptive to those ideas over time. And we've been reading this other book called Thinking in Systems by Donella Meadows. And she talks about how the highest leverage point in making change to a system is to influence the underlying ideology, the underlying mental models we use to construct reality around us. So as the environment changes, our mental models and how we understand and perceive the world also change, and we begin to look for things that are different because we start to understand that what has been is no longer working. So yeah, that is what that made me think of. And just how sometimes you gotta just lead by example and start working with what you got. I need Alvin to come in with that Dow quote: "What is small is big, and what is few is many," or something esoteric like that.
The
Yeah.
master teaches without words.
Um, I'm gonna jump in one more time before I pass it to a few more people. Alvin and Mimi, I see you guys got your hands up, but I'm gonna jump in one more time for the last chapter. I'm gonna pass it to a few more people, and then we'll start closing out. But um, thank just once again, great stuff all around. And one thing that I wanted to say to add to what Jeru said, like, yeah, lead by example. The people who are looking for your way will find you. And I think it's also important to remember, and you learn this when you study Harriet Tubman. The people who do not want to go that way cannot be your responsibility. As much as you may want them to be, if they don't want to go that way, they cannot be your responsibility. They will weigh you down and they will jeopardize the rest of the group. So it's hard sometimes, but like sometimes you got sometimes I won't repeat J. Rue's comment. But sometimes you got to lose people. So, but I want to move on into chapter 6 as my last little like summary of a piece of the book, and then I want to hear from a few more people, and then we can start closing out. But like as we already established, Joanne tells her parents she has that conversation with her dad in chapter 6 about how he's a preacher. He knows how to move people. So he passes that knowledge on to her, which she then uses later on in a lot of ways. But look, sorry, I just inhaled something. Gross. Yeah, I'm good. Yeah, mask problems. But so the other pieces of context that I just wanted to highlight from chapter 6 is that these pieces about like there is a reason that the urgency for her is increasing. One, there's a storm brewing in the Pacific in chapter 5 that nobody thinks will affect them, and then it rains for weeks. You know, Two, the little baby that we talked about, Amy Dunn, is shot dead. And it's not in some sort of conflict. A stray bullet finds her through the gate. So it's this idea that, like, you can do everything right. All the systems can be there and in place, and something can still go wrong, something unexpected that nobody could expect. Um, but then, we get into chapter 6, And this reminds me about the piece that Cass brought up, and also Donna, about this like relationship that she has with her dad, about like these beliefs and how they can be an asset sometimes, but also a hindrance because more thieves begin to break into the community and they're stealing stuff. And so the community has to put together this like group of like a night watch to like patrol the community and protect people. And there's this conflict that never really gets resolved between Lauren's dad and her stepmom about like at what cost do we protect this community? You know, like you could have to kill somebody, you know, like they have guns, you know, the thieves also have guns sometimes, you know, like somebody could kill you. But if you do nothing, then they'll do whatever they want, you know. So it's like it's this idea, and the piece that I want to bring up is that a lot of this conversation between them, a lot of this argument happens through scripture, you know. And you know, the stepmom throws out one piece and her dad throws out another piece, which is basically just like we got to do what we got to do. So I think there's also like this idea of like, you know, different interpretations of the same belief and ideology, really based not really based on the religion itself, but more based on where the people are at. You know, like yeah, like that piece about perspective that we talked about. But the last piece, and this will be the last piece from the book that I'll mention. And then I want to hear from Alvin and Mimi. I want to hear from Keenan and Miss Betty, and then I'll have Cherie close us out, and then we can get into why people came in the video. But her dad basically just says that like he doesn't know if good times are coming back. You know, there's this new president. There's the hope that maybe somebody will come through and fix this all. And he's basically like, I don't know if any of that's going to happen. But what I do know is that we won't live to see the good times if they do come back, if we don't survive the bad times now. So that's really one of the things that just sticks out to me. It's like, who knows if things are going to get better? But if we're going to be there for when they do, you know, we got to make it through whatever this is. So yeah, I want to hear from Alvin and Mimi. I want to hear from Keenan and Miss Betty. And then I'll have Cherie close us out.
Bless. I just wanted to go back to the comment that Donna had said about like this moral struggle that she has about the idea of manipulation. When like the father in this situation was and Lauren, they're both looking to help their community, but they have different ways about how to do it, and some of them are direct and some of them are indirect. And it made me think of the movie V for Vendetta. And I was wondering, like, we can talk about this later, but if you have ever seen that, the one with the Guy Fawkes mask, because that's like a man, that movie really put me on my behind, just like with that idea, because you know, again, not to have a spoiler, but there is definitely a situation of someone who is trying to help someone else and puts them through hell, and in the end, it seems like so immoral and effed up, but you also look at the character and you're like, well, what they went through and what they learned through that probably is going to help them survive and navigate the world that they live in. And so I also like struggle with that too, and just curious that that's what you made me think of. But also at some
Good
point before we
parallel.
close out, I would love to hear from Khalid, who is, I believe, the youngest person in the room.
And I would like to add one more thing too. And that is like this conversation tonight made me really think about one of the deeper questions I think this book asks is in a world of pain and violence and inequality, how do you get to a different place when everything feels unsafe and other people feel unsafe? I do think the profound question it asks is how do you get to a different, like, how do you go forward from that world? And I do think a lot of Lauren's writings, if you have interests, are very similar to some of the writings of the Tao Te Ching. Particularly, I enjoy the translation by Stephen Miller.
Preach, Alvin.
So if you're
We're all waiting
interested,
for it.
yeah,
Are you holding service?
yes,
Mm.
right now. No, I was kidding.
Sign me up.
But I do think one of the big pieces or one piece from the Tao Te Ching that I think is relevant is the idea that if you view your enemy as not human, then you become the enemy yourself. That you then become, and that I think that piece on the hyper empathy as a symbol, and also really a way that we adapt and survive together. Humans aren't an individualized species. We really are collective and collaborative. And that even in and again, no spoilers, but I think later you in the particularly in the beginning of the book, you kind of feel like this us versus them mentality of the people on the inside versus the people on the outside who are like monstrous and it's scary and it's like they're like animals that are gonna come and destroy everything, but it's more complicated than that, I think, as you go through the story
Yeah.
and try to understand, how do you see the humanity in people and trust people in a world that is very challenged.
Oh, I can't wait for the next session. That's such a good piece, Alvin. Thank you. Let's go Keenan and then Miss Betty and then Khalid and then Cherie.
Right. So I think one, grateful to be a part of the conversation and really inspired listening and looking at you, Chin, leading these book clubs, like all these years later, still on the same path that we all started on, with like doing 4 Sunday speeches, having to do book reviews and book studies. So
The
it's
good
good
old
to see.
days.
Um, sure. So the but to see the continuation of that legacy of that practice is really heartwarming and also just really good to see and be a part of. So I think um that's just first and foremost. Also on thoughts and reflections on what's been shared so far, there are a few pieces that stood out to me. I think one, I'll speak to the hyper empathy. I think it's interesting thinking about like hyper empathy being something that is dangerous to one's survival in the midst of war and conflict. Um, you know what I'm saying? But I also do share, in the opinion, I think of what you shared, Chin, earlier, that in these times that there's part of that empathy that is needed for our own collective survival. We won't be able to get to any place or idea of tomorrow or any type of a desired future state without having that sense of empathy, at least amongst one another as community. Um, and then thinking that like, I can't be out of integrity with who I am or out of character with who I am, or I can't betray you because to do that unto you is to do that to myself. So I think that was one piece of the conversation that has me in deep reflection. I think the other piece is just really in general that this book it's uncanny, right? That even the timing of how she described what would be happening in 2024 is
What you
actually
know about
taking
that, Keenan?
place. So one of the things that I experienced at the top of this year was, so I live, for context, for those that uh, I'm new to or that do not know me in this space right now. So I live in Los Angeles and I've been here. So I've been a resident of this city for the past 3 years. So, and I'm going to tie this back to hyper empathy in a second. But the top of this year started with strong winds that exacerbated a two small fires that grew overnight into huge out of control fires. So I believe it's either January 8th or January 9th, I think, one of those two dates. But I remember it was a Wednesday. Um, and that once the news of the fire started spreading, and once they had started to grow sizably, I remember driving up the 101 to where my partner lives. And I remember staying with her for the night, mindful that there was a possibility that, because she lived closer to the fires, that we would have to evacuate. And that she doesn't have a car, I do. It'd be wise for me to be close by, so that we have an option to evacuate, and to have a vehicle to be able to do that. But waking up to red and orange skies is something that I have just never experienced before in my life. That was, there's still a part of that experience that, I will continue to unpack. Um, saying just, I think not even just through like the coming months, but really throughout the years. Because there's just nothing like seeing that and then like going outside and smelling the smoke and then seeing ash, like your car covered in ashes because the fire is just that close. And then knowing that, like, for several days that there was no rain and that the fires were like 0% contained. And then in that same day that we decided to evacuate because just, the proximity and also the toxicity in the air, that a friend of mine called me when a fire broke out in Hollywood and asked me to come get him. And the fire started growing out of control very rapidly right next to his apartment. And so I'm going to tie these stories back to the hyper empathy piece because one thing that was the silver lining in the midst of all of the destruction and chaos caused by these natural events, um, you know what I'm saying, and fueled by climate collapse, that the empathy that I did see was this city really show up for itself. And so I did see a lot of the mutual aid networks that I didn't know existed. How small the world of LA really is with people helping one another. So as much as that necessarily, like, there was a piece of that was present in how communities helped one another in these times of crisis in that book and the community that Lauren lived in. Even though there was disagreements, there was all a collective sense of in that community that, hey, we're neighbors and we're in community with one another. So even though we might not agree or disagree on a lot of things, I know that if something were to happen to me, that that my neighbor would take care of y'all, and vice versa. Or something were to happen to my house or my property, my neighbor will help take care, and my neighbors will help pour in so that we can all still continue to survive this moment. So, in reading this book, this is like a stark reminder of just, uh, I think, being a keen student of the world, that Octavia birthed this novel into life, and that it is filled with a lot of wisdom and a lot of guide maps for us to be able to survive this moment that we're currently living in. That she just so well predicted, down to the resurgence of this. Uh, and I do believe that this was mentioned in the first six chapters. So I'm gonna say it: the "Make America Great Again" candidate that was running for president. So I think I'll stop there.
Yeah.
Yeah, and just say thank you all for the space and for choosing this book, and to be, so well ingrained in community, be in to act on your position in community, to be able to host this conversation.
Thank you, Keenan. All you, Miss Betty.
Okay. A lot of the things I thought about were already expressed, especially adaptability and the difference between the young coming up in that environment and the older people that came up in a different environment. But one thing I thought about is her condition as a reader. It made us feel it more. It made us more, she felt it and we felt it, other people's pain. So that's what kind of struck me about that condition, which none of us probably would ever even think of as a condition, and she thought of it in the book. And it was even, I think, made us feel it more too. So that's my thoughts.
Wonderful. And then Khalid. Yeah, so I'll give you a little bit of a prompt. But a lot of the conversation has been about, how to make it through difficult situations, how to rely on other people in those difficult situations. So maybe just if you have any reflections from, what we've heard, what we've talked about today with like, what you've heard about the book, your own experience, just any connections that you can make about how to make it through a tough time.
Well, I mean, I'm doing it right now, so. Hmm? Okay. Personally, for me, I just kind of get through it. Like, I don't really. I try not to make any excuses. I used to do it a lot, but I guess just doing it too many times, it got boring. So, um, I just, I just kind of do it, like, just do it. But in this book, I don't know. It's quite interesting. I heard what's it called? I heard about the stepfather and the stepmom. Now I have a question. Was she born into it, or did both of her parents die and then she got adopted, or
No, so her dad is her like birth dad. He remarried after her mom died after giving birth to her. But
okay. Hmm. Did I answer your question?
that's all you got.
Is there any more questions? Probably, so I don't get in trouble.
Exaggerating.
Any more questions? Hello, hello, hello.
How does it feel to be a part of the book study, Colin?
Um,
Be careful, you got a big bro on the line.
what did she say?
J. Rue asked how you feel about change.
Don't worry, I won't tell mom.
Um, I feel like it depends on what it is. You can really adapt to anything, but uh, what's it called? How do I deal with it? Um, I feel
My
like I
apologies,
said,
brother. I said, how do you feel about being in the book club in this
uh,
conversation?
That's J. Rue also asked him a question about change, so he might be talking about that a little bit at the same time. Sorry.
Oh, I didn't hear Jairus' question. My apologies.
that's okay. I'll answer your question after. Um, hmm, I don't know. I just kind of I just do it because it sounds so simple, but it is that simple. Like you just do it. Um, but here, like I said, it depends. Like moving here was kind of a big change for me. I can't hang out with my friends as much, stuff like that. Um, but if I'm just mm, that was loud. Um, uh, like if I'm trying something new because it's good for me, and I don't like the taste of it, I don't know, just taking little steps to enjoy it, if that makes sense. And yeah. And then Keenan, what was your question? How did I like the book? What was it?
It was
I
how do
like
you
being
feel about being in the conversation?
um I like being here. It's just I come right after school, so I'm really tired and I can't stay awake. So yeah. But I like it. I just don't really hear anything. Any more questions?
I guess you won't be upset at a 7 p.m. bedtime then. Mm-mm-mm.
All right, we're gonna have Bill give us our last comment before I pass it to Cherie to close us out. And then I still want to make time for people to share like what made them decide to join today. If people are willing to stay for a little bit after that, we can still watch this video. If not, we'll close it out. So, but yeah, thanks so much for a great conversation.
Um, I was just, when Keenan was saying something about he was retelling a story about the fires and how everybody pulled together in a way. I think that's something that I took a lot of solace from in the past. Um, is that humans really have evolved to be collaborative and empathetic species. Like that's what separates us from a lot of other things is that it's in our DNA to work together and to feel empathy in a way that no other animal does. Um, and there's a lot of evidence from history that when the chips are down, people band together way more often than they pull apart. And so even though like things seem when I don't know, that's something that helped me a lot when I was in a dark place, not that dark of a place, but when I get down about the state of the world, I realize it's really not in our nature to do that. We're really collaborative, empathetic beings. And that's, I think, what Keenan was saying. He saw that the city came together in that moment and that just happens all of the time, usually when it happens. So I think it's a really cool idea.
If you don't, I would like to share one thing regarding that. In doing a lot of work with folks in the climate justice space, one sentiment that has been often shared is that in the midst of crisis, community acts much faster than the government.
I know that's right.
Yeah, it is
And in collapse,
always
there's opportunity.
yes. As every single natural disaster or collapse occurs, or some sort of ecological crisis or climate injustice, whether it be a large oil spill, a plastics plant blowing up, a railroad being derailed, and causing havoc in the community, it's always the people that are most impacted that step up and help one another first before anybody else gets there. So that was just to emphasize the point that I don't know your name, but whoever that was that just spoke, to emphasize that
Bill.
point that you made.
Well said, man. Well said. But yeah, it is basically 8. So I'll pass it to Cherie to maybe give us the last comment, and then we'll start closing it out for today.
Hmm. I guess the thing that I'm thinking about, and thank you all for your wonderful observations and just being vulnerable and sharing about your lived experiences in the world in relation to this amazing novel. I'm just thinking about two things or two images. The seed, right? Because Lauren, who is this kind of unassuming young woman who is in a very messed up situation, plant some powerful seeds in her community, right? And as you keep reading this novel, you're going to see how they take shape and bear fruit in the community. And I'm also thinking about obviously fire, right? Not just the very real and literal fires that are sweeping communities across this country, right? But also the fire that comes from the mythic ideal of rebirth, the ideal that, you in a place that can be desolate and it seems like there's not hope, right? And this idea of scorched earth, that there is a kind of renewal that can come out of the old world. And the things that we relied on before, we find that there are other things that we can lean on and have strength in. And one of those things is each other. So I'm hoping that the thing that comes out of reading this novel and these conversations is that we have renewed hope and have a lit fire in ourselves, right? To really try to show to move through these changes that we're facing as a society, and really, really plant other seeds that we're going to nurture together as communities, because the characters go through some very devastating, scary stuff. But at the end of the day, there is that hope, right? So that's what I hope you take with you as you read the rest of the novel.
Yeah.
Octavia Butler created for us, that we still talking about 30 years
30 years later, man. Yeah.
later.
Well, yeah. Thank you so much for that, Cherie. I think that's a perfect place to leave it for tonight. Obviously, we'll be back in 2 weeks. The goal is to go through chapters 7 through 12. So if you can read that much by then, please do. If you can't and don't care about spoilers, please come back. And if you can't and do care about spoilers, well, we'll do our best, But thank you so much to everybody who joined us today, both in person and on the Zoom. Thank you so much to everybody who's watching the recording of this or the live stream, who cannot interact directly. Cherie said, see you if you can make it through. Yes, thank you. Sorry, had to read the chat. But yeah, thank you as well to the Indianapolis Recorder, one of our longtime community partners, and specifically a partner with this Mumbo Jumbo project. And as always, if you enjoyed what you saw here today, if you enjoyed the discussion and want to make sure we can keep them going, go to donate.kepler.org and leave us something generous. And so, we will officially close out now, but I say let's maybe just leave the Zoom up for like 5 minutes in case folks want to go around and share. If this is your first time, how'd you find out about it? What made you decide to come? And if you haven't been here in a while, what made you decide to come back? So I will pick people. I know who's been here and who hasn't, so I would appreciate volunteers. But perfect. Thank you. Thank you, Sarah.
Brought me here. Chin brought me here. And I brought Jake. The end.
So that works.
First time at a Mumbo Jumbo, but not first time here. And working with CLT on some things too. So love the space, love the place, love the people. So happy to have found it in Indy. Yay.
Yeah, Sim got introduced to Kepler through CLT stuff. Community Land Trust. Yeah. Yeah, Alvin does a lot with that. And I think just being, building community and being part of conversation, I like intellectual stimulation too. So I think it's fun. It's a nice thing to do.
And then thank you, Tom. We'll see you later. I think we got a hand from Donna as well.
Yeah, this is my first time here for Mumbo Jumbo. Honestly, this book and this book series traumatized me. And so a little bit of processing, honestly. I've been able to talk to you, Chin, and Z, about it, like through while I was reading it, but I think that the more I talk about it, the more it's easier to just kind of process. And I say traumatized, which is a very accurate word to describe how I felt. But it wasn't like a unnecessary thing. I think that it was just kind of like opening up my eyes to a lot of like what actually is happening in the world around me. Like it painted everything like very differently and like was super sobering. So I think it's nice to be able to talk about some of the themes in community and with people who are actually like also seeing and willing to talk about the themes.
Thank you, Donna. I think Miss Betty, I think this is your first time here in a while as well.
Miss Pombana has her hand raised as well, if you can't see
Oh,
it.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I didn't see it. It's blending in with the painting on the wall.
No worries. I just want to know, can you drop the link to the video in it so we can watch it on our own time?
Yes, we will. And we will also make sure that we make time to watch it at the next session as well. So.
Okay, I haven't been around for a while, but I saw this on Facebook and thought I love this book and I was interested in the discussion, and that's why I decided to come. So I really, really appreciated this conversation tonight.
Excellent. Thank you, Miss Betty. And yeah, there's that link in the chat. Yeah. Let's see. Well, I think the only other people on the chat on the call are Kepler people. So,
This
yeah.
democracy now, the quarantine.
Oh, he played it by accident. Okay, but yeah. Thank you guys for coming so much. Good to meet some new folks, and well, I'm meeting a lot of new folks, re-meeting some folks as well. But yeah, thank you guys.